Hello and welcome to FPL Have a Beer, where I invite you to have a beer with me while I talk about FPL. Please like if you enjoy the video and subscribe to help support the channel and this interview series. This will be the first interview going out in 2025. We've previously interviewed other fantasy football scout legends like the one we've got today, Joe and FPL Mode. We've also had some other popular content creators on like Yelena and FPL Mate. And we're also trying to get up to 300 subscribers at the moment. So if you could subscribe to help us get there, it would be much appreciated. So welcome to another interview in the Meet the FPL Manager, Meet the FPL Content Creator interview series, where I ask one of our lovely FPL content creators in the community to come on to talk about their experiences of content creation, their thoughts about FPL and mental health, and just to have a general chat about FPL and how their season is going towards the end. So for the 13th interview in this series, we have Pras of the FPLWire Fantasy Football Scout. It's a pleasure to have you on, Pras. I've been a massive fan since I first saw you on Burning Questions 3 or 4 years ago. It was like during COVID, wasn't it, I think? It blew my mind away. That became my must-listen-to podcast at the time. How are you? Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on, and always lovely to have the OG Burning Question listeners, because those people know me from the time when I wasn't doing any content to just starting out talking about the game. So I appreciate you having me on the channel.
Yeah, and we're gonna hopefully go over all that. Your from the humble beginnings to Sky Sports. That's how I might. That's what I might put on the thumbnail of this.
Massively glorified, but yeah, we take it.
So I know you said you've watched one or two of the interviews, Praz. What I usually do, just like ask you a couple of general questions. I'm sure everyone watching this will know who you are, but could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, where did you grow up? I know that's with you involves quite a few places, possibly. Who do you support? What are your first memories of football? Just stuff like that.
So, yeah, I mean, I have watched a couple of interviews with some big, great managers like Tom from Who Got the Assist, Joe, some average managers like, Andy FPL Mode. So, it's a wide variety of guests. Obviously, I love Andy. He knows I'm joking. So, I mean, my background, look, as you can tell from my accent, is I grew up in India, but I actually only spent about 10 years of my life, or even less, I think 9 in India. I used to live in New Delhi, and then so my whole family moved to East Africa in Uganda, and that was when I basically started watching football, because I went to a British school there, and all the kids were talking about football and playing this game, actually ironically called fantasy football, where you pick players, and we used to play it on paper, and basically just pick I think we used to pick 5 players.
So this was have a budget. This was like that version of the game they'd made themselves.
Yeah. Right, we just used to, as between friends, we used to pick like 5 players we like, no budget, just almost like a draft where nobody had the same players, but just used to pique people's interest. That's how I got into it, because I started playing that, and it was also the time when a certain Eric Cantona had joined Manchester United. So I am really giving away my age here. But it was the time when he joined Manchester United. They won their first Premier League, and it was just one of those things where I started supporting the team, which looked really good. As a kid, you like the fact that they're winning and they're on the up, and it turned out to be something amazing, because those are probably the best, I would say, 20 years of supporting a football club, and I got very lucky that I picked one that actually ended up having that journey. So, Man United fan since the beginning. I mean, the early memories were actually just, I suppose, that season where Cantona scored the goal in the FA Cup final to win us the double.
The Liverpool against Liverpool, was it?
Against Liverpool, exactly. So those are some of the early memories. I do remember a little bit before that as well, when we had the 94 World Cup. I think it was just before that. And so that somewhat I remember that. But then after that, obviously, the big memories of, how Man United won Premier League after Premier League, the treble in 99, the Champions League in 2009, and things like that. So
yeah, I think I've said on the interview series before, I think sounds like we got into football at the same sort of time, and I was between Man United and Newcastle, thinking about the 94-95 season, who I was going to support. I didn't have any affiliations to either, and I think from a trophy perspective, I may have chosen the wrong one in Newcastle.
Well, that was a good season for you. I still have the the 5-0 in which the fifth goal, the Albert commentary in my head, it's stuck in my head forever because that was such a traumatizing game. But yeah, that was the team, man. I mean, you guys had an amazing team.
It's probably stuck in my head for the complete opposite reasons. It's probably my greatest memory in football.
Exactly.
Okay. So you said when you started playing fantasy football, any particular early memories that stick out with that?
Not really, because at that point we used to just pick the best players. Like there were 5 of us, and we used to pick 5 each. I think it was 5, maybe it was 8. But you never actually researched into the players for the bottom 8 teams, right? I mean, you used to basically stick to the big guys. I think my earliest memory of proper playing FPL is basically, so I was in East Africa. I then came back to India, did my undergrad or college, university. Then I went to the US to do my master's. And so when I was in the US, that was 2008 to 2010. I ended up then coming to London when I started my job. So 2010 was when I started my job. I used to stay.
So what year did you start playing?
2010. So that was the first time I played FPL. Okay. So obviously I used to play fantasy games before, but FPL was 2010, was my first year. And that was basically a case of, I like football. Oh my God, I'm in London. I was living with my brother-in-law, who's obviously born and brought up here. And he basically got me hooked on this game that he was playing. And when you're a football player and somebody says you want to play fantasy football, you're like, yeah, this is easy, man. I mean, yeah, you just have to pick these players. I know I'm picking Lampard, I'm picking, Wayne Rooney, and it's easy. And then you suddenly end up with you've used up your budget and you've got 6 slots left. So that was my first memory of this is not easy. You have to actually do research. And so 2010 was my first year, had a couple of bad seasons, but after that, it just became a game which I was obsessed with because it was so geeky and it related to football, both of the things that align very well with me.
I think most of us take a couple of seasons to learn the game, don't we? I remember Joe still said, it's still my favourite quote from the interview series is when Joe from FF Scout said it took him 4 months to realise he could change his captain.
Or make subs, or hits actually cost points when you make 5 subs at 5 transfers at the same time. All of that stuff you don't even realize, and you forget transfers, right? You forget weeks, go off on Christmas, come back, and you're like, oh yeah, I was playing this game, and I need to make transfers again.
So you're playing FPL. You're living in London at this point.
Yep.
So I said to you, the first time I became aware of you was Burning Questions. I know there may have been stuff before that. So you're playing FPL. When do you decide or perhaps you didn't decide, perhaps it's an opportunity to go from being an FPL player to a content creator?
So it wasn't actually an opportunity. I mean, a lot of things happened simultaneously that led, or sequence of events that led me to do this Burning Questions podcast. So basically from 2010 to 2020, so I'm talking 10 years, I did nothing, like no content creation, used to just consume some FPL content, but not a lot. Because I had a very busy job. I had, the first 10 years of my life in London were very hard. I used to work at a bank and I used to play FPL because I used to love football and I used to love the game. But the amount I used to spend on it used to be basically like 2 hours on a Friday night and maybe the Saturday morning, if it's a Saturday morning deadline, quickly going on fantasy football scout forums, having a chat with a few people on, why are you buying Alonso and not the cheaper guy? Why is Ivanilson the guy? Ivanovic the guy? That was it. So I didn't really have time. I was working 5 days a week in the office, so there was no time to actually do any content, nor there was an opportunity. What happened was basically during lockdown, when there was no content, right? Football wasn't happening. Joe, who you talked about, basically reached out and said, do you want to come on Scout to do Meet the Manager? Okay. And so Meet the Manager is basically a series which he does, which he talks about some Hall of Fame managers.
Yeah, I love that. So, can I ask? So that was because you had a good record. I'm taking it.
I did have a good rank. Yeah. And he had gone through the people with insane ranks, so he had reached the next level, which are people with good ranks. So I was the guy with good ranks. And the thing about me is, I don't have the top 1,000 ranks. I have very consistent ranks. So like since 2011, I haven't finished outside the top 100K. Since 2016, I haven't finished outside the top 50K. So basically, this is the thing that sort of typifies me as a playing style. And so that's what he wanted to explore a little bit.
Mr. Consistent.
And so, Mr. Consistent.
Bit like Joe himself.
Bit like Joe, and basically, try to make good moves every single week, be consistent, don't lose it. And so that generally ends up with a decent rank. So we had a chat on Meet the Manager. This was during lockdown. And then, I think a week later, Man United had a triple game week. You remember that time when Man United had the 3 games?
I do. Didn't they rotate completely?
They did completely rotate, but basically what happened was Late Riser on the FPLWire, he knew me and he was like, look, I'm looking to get a bunch of Man United fans to just have a chat on what does this mean. So that was my first guest appearance on the FPLWire, which happened a week after Meet the Manager.
Right.
So again, I'm not doing anything. I was just invited on these couple of things. So I did these 2 things. And then again, FF Scout basically DMs me and says, look, we're looking to freshen up the FF Scout rota, and we want somebody to basically come in and have a show where they just talk about some important things about FPL. Like, it's your choice who you want to bring, what you want to do on it. And I was like, look, I mean, I work, but right now it's lockdown, and I had basically changed jobs in which there was the ability to work from home a couple of days a week. And so I said, look, it's not a bad idea. I'm bored out of my mind during lockdown. Maybe I'll do this. That was when Project Restart was happening. So the new, the football was back.
Yeah.
And so I said, yeah, let's do it. And I got Sonaldo on, Andy Sonaldo, who you may know through X. Of course, if you listen to Burning Questions. And so he was basically doing his spaces on Twitter called FPL Enablers. And I joined a couple of spaces with him. And I thought he's a good speaker, knowledgeable about the sport. Something different.
Sorry, Pras, just for anyone who doesn't know, because I didn't know what this was until someone else mentioned it. That's like a part of Twitter where you can open up and have conversations with lots of people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's basically like a voice call or a voice chat, a conference call that you can listen in on. And so it's so we had a couple of those, and I reached out to Andy and I said, look, you want to do something? We'll do it on a Wednesday or a Tuesday afternoon. That's your night. So does that work for you? I can't host. I don't know anything about hosting. If you're happy to host, then I can do the work. So we agreed. And basically that's how Burning Questions was formed. At the time, there was no commitment. We were not even getting paid. Not that it's an issue, but we were, it was just like, we'll do it because it's fun, because, it's nice, and, making content is fun. I used to take it so seriously. And the reason why a lot of people like Burning Question is I used to research for maybe 4 to 5 hours before the podcast on what are we going to talk about? Do I have all the data? Now, when I do the FPLWire, I do like an hour's research and I show up. Like, it's a little bit of you get overconfident or cocky maybe. But when you're initially doing it, you really want to showcase how your mind works. How do you think about the game? And so that's what we did. Basically, everything that I was thinking on FPL, I used to put it down in my notes, talk about it with Andy. So my way of thinking is a lot of planning, a lot of future planning, a lot of thinking about my team, a lot of data. All of that used to be discussed on Burning Questions. And, thanks to people like yourself, it became quite successful, one of the more successful shows on Scout, and that's how the journey began.
Yeah, I think your styles really work well together as well, because Snowdo he likes presenting things graphically, doesn't he? And it goes more seems to go more into the depth in terms of teams, whereas I'm gonna ask you about it in a little more micro level. You go in between the both. It was just a really good mixture. I mean, it literally became. I'm a big fan of Fantasy Football Scout. The Scoutcast, but that probably hadn't been must listen to it for me for a couple of years. And as soon as Burning Questions started, it became along with Black Box, like my must listen to thing. Right. So, and how long did that last for? Was that like a year and a half?
Almost 2 years, I think.
Almost 2 years.
I think we did 2 full seasons and a half. So actually 2.5 years that was. So I think up until 2022, I want to say, end of the 2022 season. And yeah, it was just a case of, at that point, the FPLWire was also looking for a third co-host, and basically Zoff and LR reached out to me and they said, do you want to join us as the third member? And my first reaction was, I can't work 2 days. I can't commit to 2 days of, podcasting in the afternoon. I have a day job. I can do one during a lunchtime and block an hour, but I can't do like, consistently something that I can commit to because I travel for work. Sometimes work is busy. I used to miss a couple of episodes of Burning Questions as well. And so the first thing was, look, let me talk to Andy. Like, if he wants to do something else, my evening time. But then that was his early morning.
Is Andy Sonaldo's real name? Sorry.
Yeah. Sonaldo's real name is Andy.
There's so many Andys in the FPL community.
So many Toms and Andys. You've had like 8 Toms already, and you'll have more Andys in the future as well. So Sonaldo, I spoke to him and I said, look, we won't be able to do an afternoon show because I think the FPLWire I listen to it a lot and I am keen to join them. So we just couldn't work out a time where we could do it. We could do a podcast with Andy or Sonaldo, who's based in South Korea. So I basically moved on, and Harry, who everyone knows, joined Burning Questions, and I moved on to do Deadline Dilemmas last season with Flapjack. And so that was also something fun. But as my core thing, basically beginning of last season, I started doing the FPLWire with Zofar and Late Riser, who are, again, excellent managers. I listen to them a lot, and I feel like it's a very different blend where, Late Riser, as everybody knows, is the risk taker. He has the maverick moves. Zoff is the safe manager, and I'm like the planner. So you can basically get 3 different perspectives on every single issue. None of them are wrong. And whoever resonates with whichever one of us, like we get comments in our chat all the time, like, these 2 are great, but this guy doesn't make sense, and it works for all 3 of us because people tend to resonate with some of us and completely disagree with the other. So that's just the kind of listening audience we have on the FPLWire. And Deadline Dilemmas is basically like a team selection. Like we basically talk about our teams just before the deadline.
I was going to ask you just before, I've got a couple of questions here about FPLWire, but just about FPL Dilemmas, because it comes out at a very strange time in the week, as in it's like as close to the press conferences you can get without having the press conferences, whereas I suppose the Wire and Burning Questions are earlier in the week, so you've got a much more broader range of issues you talk about. So how do you find that, just in terms of like making the podcast at that time of week?
So last year it used to be live on a Thursday, and so Thursday live made sense because it's not before the press conferences. I think this year they've moved to video, and we still record on a Thursday night. It's just that the video is uploaded by Friday morning, late morning. Sometimes it becomes even later, and so ideally it should be uploaded Friday morning, early morning, so people can listen to it on a Friday. We tend to keep it small, shorter as well, like at 30 to 40 minutes, so people can digest it.
Yeah.
But I do get it. It's something that I'm trying to work on, can we do something else? Now, I can't record on a Friday morning, Friday afternoon, because I do go into work. But we'll see if we can start live streaming. It's a very new show, and we're trying to figure it out on what to do there.
Yeah. What going to the Wire? What are Zofar and Late Riser? Whenever I see his name, I always want to say Lateralizer or
Later.
Something. But it's Late Riser. What are those guys like to work with?
As they are in podding, like, Zofar is very laid back. He's quite chilled. If you ask him to do a late pod, he'll be like, nah, man, that's my chill out time. I'm done now. I've had my dinner. I'm going to go take a nap. If you try to basically change the day, then, so he's fairly relaxed. And for him, podcasting is one of those things, right? It's not the end all be all. So, but at the same time, he does all the back end. He hosts us. He does all the tech. So, he is our main man in terms of he has all the keys, all the buttons. And Late Riser is the same. Like, he is same as the personality that pods. He's so passionate about the game. Even when we're not podding, we'll be DMing and he'll be thinking about, should I be doing this guy or this guy? And in a very passionate way. Like me, I'm a little bit of a laid back FPL manager. Like if I know what moves I'm doing next week and nothing has changed, I'm not going to change that. Like even if another player scored a hat trick, I'll be like, that's fine. Like people score hat tricks, not the end of the world. But, he's more what's happening right now. I watched the highlights and I've seen this and I think we should react on this. So it's a very different play style. And I think that's also the way he... Yes. So they're both very unique personalities.
Excellent. Just had a bit of an issue there, but I think we're back recording now.
Yeah.
So the next question I was going to ask you is related to the why. So I know I've got a few Indian subscribers on my own channel because they commented on one of my videos that the Wire is basically their favourite podcast FPL content. So big shout out to anyone watching in India. I was just wondering because obviously you make the Wire, but obviously you're from India. Why do you think? I mean, I don't know the exact statistics, but India certainly seems to have the biggest FPL fan base outside of like the UK, America. You know, it seems to. Why do you think it has such a big fan base in India?
Well, I think firstly, the number one listeners for the FPL Wire are from the UK. Second is
really? Okay.
So there are quite a few UK listeners. Look, I think football is huge in India. Like when I grew up in India, and I obviously worked in India for a couple of years as well. The timing of it, the fact that the afternoon games there are at like 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. It's like a perfect time. You go out with friends and you watch the football.
And they're all all the matches are on, I guess. So
all the matches are on TV, and it's just a case of like over, between late 90s to early 2000s when Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea were all developing. Everybody had a team. Everybody was supporting a team. And it's just how the Premier League has grown. It's basically a good example of how the Premier League has grown globally. And I think with India, it's a case of, it's a sports crazy country. Everybody loves cricket in India. And I think football is the second most popular thing.
I was going to say it couldn't have overtaken cricket as the most popular.
For some people, it has. Like I watch more football than cricket, but in some cases, it is one of those things where cricket is something they've grown up with their whole life. So it's difficult to replace. I think the other thing with the Indian audience is like they're way more passionate. No, not more, but they're very passionate. Like you wouldn't believe. Like the Champions League games start at 1:30 a.m. like especially in the winter because the clocks change. And I know so many people that religiously watch every single Champions League game for their team. So that's basically a commitment of staying up till 3:30 a.m. and basically going into work. And I know, so many people do it. And this is true even of Asia, like, rest of Asia, like Southeast Asia. People are based in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore. They're watching games at 3 a.m., waking up to watch games at 3 a.m. So that's a whole different level of commitment to your team. And the passion is just equally the same. So I think...
I wouldn't be able to do that, I don't think.
I wouldn't be able to do that either. Like I used to do that at a certain time. I'm not doing it now with kids when I have to wake up for their school and I have work, and like I'd be so grumpy. So I just think there's a whole different level of passion there. And I think the second thing is Indians are, by and large, I don't want to stereotype a whole country, but they are mathematical, analytical type thinking people. And this game attracts two types of people. And we talk about grass versus analytics. I think the types of people it attracts are people who are a mix of these two. So you could be more a football fan, but a very smart person who understands how FPL pricing works, how budget works. It's not just about picking Isak versus Jackson. It's about picking, if I go for Jackson, that saves me some money so I can go for a more expensive defender. So it's about those balances of picking these players. And so therefore, it is a geeky game. And so if you are analytically minded and you like football, I think FPL is perfect. So this is why I think that is the other reason why FPL has grown in India, where people just tend to do well. Indians just tend to do well they are everywhere. It's not just about India, but this is specifically a question about India. So I think that's what attracts people to the game.
Awesome. Interesting. So we sort of covered going to go into some of the more general questions you asked now, Pras. We've covered some of these, so feel free to just, give brief answers. But I was just wondering how your early experiences of content creation have sort of changed compared to what they're like now, if that makes sense.
I feel when I started in 2020, content creation was about doing something that nobody else is doing. Like try to tell people that something that nobody else is doing, because there was space, right? There was not so much content out there. So you could say, okay, this podcast is talking about the games as a reaction. This podcast is talking about data. So maybe there's a space to talk about fixtures and future planning and various other things, right? I feel now it's a little bit different where everything is there. It's saturated. Everything is out there. So now it's a case of you connecting, people wanting to connect to your play style and wanting to hear from you. This is why we started doing on the FPL Wire team selection. where people want to basically understand your way of thinking.
I noticed that you do.
Like, how are you?
You do an individual one each now, don't you? Each week, yeah.
We do weekly a team selection video as well, where you're basically saying, this is what my brain is thinking about right now. This is how I'm thinking about the game. And I feel this is where FPL content is going, where people have content creators with their like. It's not about the show. Like, I'm not using my example. Let's say Joe, who we like. If Joe gets up and starts doing black box, then people will move with him. And I feel that's where we are right now with content creation, because I think people are starting to have a brand, if you see what I mean.
It's more about personalities than just the content itself.
Correct. People resonate with certain people, their views. And so it's about developing that and having a more balanced view about things. Some people appreciate, this is the player you need to buy, and these are the 5 reasons why, right? So some people like that kind of content. Some people will like, these are the 5 players you will buy. None of them are important. Some you could buy. Here's the reasons why, and here's the reasons why you shouldn't buy. Make your own decision. And there's everything in the middle. So I feel people are gravitating towards something like that. And maybe it's because of Twitter, X, where they hear about certain people and they tend to follow them. And you look at the growth for Harry, Raptor, Foco, Andy, Let's Talk FPL. I think that's where it has come from. That those guys want to hear from individuals, not just a podcast which they want to listen to on a weekly basis.
This isn't actually a question I'd written down, Pras, but would you ever think of like going on your own, if that makes sense, like a Raptor or a Focal?
I wouldn't. Like, I don't have the time. Like with my day job, I would never do that, and I will never leave my day job. It's a highly satisfying, good line of work, and I would never leave that. And the second thing is, I just love. Oh, actually, 3 things. Second, I'm rubbish at tech. Like, I could do nothing apart from just showing up and talking about FPL. And the third thing is, I love what I do now. I love the Scout. I love the FPLWire, and I would never sort of think about doing, because it has never. It's very easy for me to say this, but it's not because of money. Like I told you, like initially I wasn't doing this for money at all. Even now I don't do it for money. I just love to talk about FPL. Like, that's just how it is. So you could give me double the money to start my own channel, and I'd be like, nah, it's fine. Like, I'm happy what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I think from conversations I've had off screen, you have to really, really get quite big to earn serious money out of FPL content creation, don't you?
Exactly.
So I was going to ask you if you could tell me what maybe the positives and negatives of being a content creator are. And within that, Pras, I thought, because I'm guessing this must be one of your big positives, is your experience of going on to Sky Sports and the official FPL show. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about what that was like.
So I will start with that as a positive. Like, it gives you a wide space to do something which sometimes you're sitting there and you're like, wow, I'm sitting in the Sky Sports studio. Like, I used to watch this as a 12-year-old. This is the same presenter who I've been watching for the last 15 years, and now I'm actually having a conversation with her. This is where they do Soccer Saturday. I'm sitting on that chair. So it is, it's amazing how a stupid game where you're moving around T-shirts gets you and gives you access to things like that. Like,
sorry, Pras, because I don't actually have Sky. I'm assuming it's something FPL related to you. What did you actually go on there to do?
So Sky have a show which is basically, it's at 11 p.m. or 10:30 a.m. on Saturdays, which is basically the FPL show before deadline. And so it's basically the last 30 minutes or the last 1 hour before the deadline. And they basically ask you, your final things, who should people buy and sell. It's like a FPL show. And right after 11:30, what starts? Soccer Saturday. So it's in the same studio. Those awesome. Chairs are right next to us. We're just standing, and so you don't actually see those chairs that the other guys are sitting on, but it's right there, which is incredible. And so that's the Sky thing. And then there's an official FPL show, which is on a Friday morning. And so there's, I think, 5 of us that rotate and go on it. So me, Gianni, Harry, Sam, and Az. So between the 5 of us, we sort of rotate. And that's basically at Stockley Park. And that's where they record it. And that's with Kelly Sommers. And that's a proper FPL show in terms of they have a full agenda of what are the dilemmas. So it's a little bit more FPL related production versus the Sky Sports one, which is a production for the masses, right? It's basically talking about, hey, did you know Cunha could be banned kind of thing, rather than who are the Cunha replacements.
Yeah, like Sky Sports is in West London, isn't it? They film West London somewhere.
Yeah.
Is it is the FPL show out there as well?
No, the FPL show is actually in Stockley Park. So
okay, I'm not sure what that is.
Longleat Road. But anyway,
London.
It's in the West as well. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, any other positives and negatives you could tell us about more generally?
So positives, look, I mean, you get a lot of, you get a lot of love if you're doing well. A lot of people come to you, ask for advice. A lot of people come and say they watch the show. It's nice, right? It gives you a little bit of a dopamine hit when people appreciate what you're doing.
Sure.
So I think I like that element of it. Like I had 2,000 followers before I started Burning Questions. Now we're like at 60,000. So, it's not about followers, but it's about the fact that you're appreciated. There are people out there that think that, it's worth listening to somebody who basically generally just waffles about football. So it's a nice feeling. You make a lot of friends in the community. I think and this isn't true for content creation, but I think a little bit more so because you get more opportunities, I suppose, to meet, the other guys who are doing the same content. Like I run into Harry, I ran into Az, I ran into Joe. I met Late Riser when I was in India earlier. I've met General, so many people that I've met through this. We have this North versus South football game, which they did for the content creators. So I was a part of that. So met Ben Krellin.
Oh, nice.
So I think making friends and also like-minded friends, because everybody's doing the same thing in terms of content and how they're going through the journey. I think that has been a massive positive. I think the negative is basically you will never stop people from not liking what you're doing. And that could be because what you're saying doesn't resonate with them, which is perfectly fine. It's normal. Nobody will agree. Not everyone will agree with your views. I think there's people who generally don't want you to succeed or not happy for you to succeed because they think, look, this guy's speaking in the same way or thinking in the same way as me. Why is he getting all this success, or why is he getting all these followers or the FPL show and stuff like that? There'll always be people like that.
Yeah.
And then there's a general clique forming that hate content creators. Like that also sometimes gets on my nerve when it's just people trying to work hard.
Is that all this what do you call it? Like the mafia? I can't think that's been going around recently.
I don't want to name names because
Sorry, not the names of the person. The idea that the content creators have some sort of cartel.
Oh, the cartel. No. That's not what I mean. I mean more in general. Like people going, oh, content creators think they're doing this, or they're making us do this, or these content creators, they're all ranked at 4 million and they don't know what they're talking about. There's a general hate towards them as if, people have some agenda. The only thing content creators want is actually to give good advice, because the only way to grow organically, to get new people to listen, is to actually be right about what they're saying. So, it's and we're talking about a game that is luck based. So all you can do is everybody has 11 dice every single game week. You're telling people to pick a number on the dice which has the highest probability. So you're telling people captain this guy. So if I tell you captain Salah this week, I can only say there's a 70% chance that Salah scores the most. There's a 30% chance that Palmer scores more. So I will still give you advice of Salah scoring more, but Palmer could score more, right? 30% can happen. That doesn't mean that was bad advice. This is what people miss in terms of getting advice. Oh, content creators all picked Salah. They're all idiots because Palmer scored 12 points and Salah scored 2 points. No, that's not how it works. So that's something that is a negative. And when I see it on the timeline or when I see people talking about it, I sort of have to hold myself back and go, it's fine. You can't make everyone happy.
Just calm yourself a bit.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm generally a very, very calm person. It takes a lot for me to get angry, especially online.
Yeah.
So you will never see it online, but it does get under the skin sometimes when you read about it.
Okay, great. A couple more questions before we go on to talk about FPL and mental health, Pras. I know this is probably a bit of a difficult question, but is there any advice you give to any FPL content creators wanting to start out or early in their journey?
It's difficult for me to give advice like, grind it out. There'll be many videos where you won't get views because I started from a very privileged position. I got the Fantasy Football Scout platform immediately. So I have no experience to give people or lecture people about how to grow a channel. All I can say is my mantra when I used to start a podcast used to be, if I'm telling people something they already know, they're going to stop listening to me eventually. I want to tell people something they don't know. So it's easy to say, buy this player, sell this player, but I want to tell them why. I want them to understand the working of, am I talking about the data? What am I seeing in it? And so this was my thinking. I used to do the notes, and a lot of times Ronaldo used to look at it and say, or sometimes Ronaldo would do the notes, and I would go, no, that's not going to work because everyone is talking about this. So for us to tell everybody, oh, sell this player, buy this player, that's not good enough. It needs to be why, and we need to tell people what they don't know. Maybe they have not thought about the fact that this player could have a double game week in 4 weeks' time, and maybe picking this guy is slightly better. They haven't even thought about these things. That used to be the bar that I used to keep. And I would give people that advice. If you're doing an FPL themed content, if you're doing something like what you do or the Juice guys do, that's a whole different genre of FPL content. You guys are already starting out from a point of you're giving people something that is evergreen. You can listen to this anytime, and you're giving something different. And I think this is a case of, you have to have patience. It will grow, and the more you do, the better it will get. So that's a slightly different advice. My advice is more tailored towards, maybe FPL related weekly content. And I think I would strongly say, tell them what they don't know.
Yeah, I think that probably attests to why the burning questions were so good, because there are. I think just from a personal point of view, not that I'm trying to blow smoke up your ass or anything, but I think a lot of the time, sometimes you do feel like you're watching the same information presented over and over again. Last question is a bit of fun, to be honest, Pras. In this section, I'm going to guess the answer to this one is yes. Have you ever been recognised out on the street as your FPL self?
Like 3 or 4 times, so not too many times, which is fine. I'm happy with that. I'll tell you the funny one. I was coming out from work during lunch. I was with my boss, who knows I do podcasts, but he doesn't know. Like your friend says he does a podcast, or your colleague says he does a podcast, and you don't really get into it, like what or how big are you and whatever. And then we're coming back from lunch, going into the office, and this guy comes to me and says, "Hey, are you Pras?" And so my boss is like, "Oh, he listens to you. That's great." Not only that, he's like, "Can I have a selfie with you?"
Wow.
And I was like, "Sure." And so the boss is like looking at me like, is it popular, your podcast? Like, do people listen to it? I said, I mean, it's reasonably popular. And so that was my fun one, where somebody did recognize me, but it's rare, and it's a little geeky circle, right? So it's not a very popular thing. I like it.
I would use the opportunity. I said, boss, the podcast's getting really big. You better give me a pay rise, or
No, not at all. In fact, the boss would have said, "Are you spending too much time on the podcast and not focusing enough on the work?"
Yeah, true. Okay, so we'll go on now to talk a little bit about FPL and mental health, which is a bit of a focus of the channel. Pras, a reminder, if you are watching, I've only just started remembering to do this in the middle of the video. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. It would mean the world to me to help help the channel grow and help me get more great guests like Pras on. So as I said, mental health is a little bit of a focus on the channel. I make an occasional videos in addition to the interview series about things like what's a good FPL ranking, is it really important, should we watch deadline streams and stuff like that. So usually try and break this down a bit into like maybe 2 questions, Pras. So has FPL ever had an effect on your mental health and mood? And maybe could you answer that first of all, maybe as a player prior to content creation, and then, has it as a content creator, and is that different at all?
So I think that's a great question. And I think this would be applicable for people who are starting out playing. And I would say even the first 5 years of playing, where actually FPL gets to you a lot. Because as a game, what we think is, when we put in hours and hours of research thinking about, should I pick player A or player B? If I put 6 hours of work compared to the other guy who's put 1 hour of work, I should win. Like most of the times I should win. But ultimately, the hours you spend were on player A was 51% likely to do well. player B was 49% likely to do well. So your hours of work meant you made the right choice, but it didn't mean that you were certain to get lucky, because 49% is still a big chance that you were wrong. So I think where I struggled was outcome. Like, it took me a long time to understand that FPL is about the joy of making the decision, the joy of Monday to Friday.
You did say you didn't spend that long on your decisions though before you started content. Is that right?
No, but what I mean is, even if it's 2 hours compared to somebody who's 5 minutes, right? So it's a relative thing. Yeah. So if I'm spending time on fantasy football scout forums and things like that, you're still thinking I'm giving enough to the game that I deserve the rewards.
Sure.
Or think about it like, even if you're not spending time making the decisions on FPL or watching FPL content, you're still watching football matches. So you're in a work league where you're watching the football games, and this other guy comes and says, "Who is Madueke? He scored 3 goals in the last 3 games. I'll pick him." And then Madueke scores a brace. Yeah. So basically, you also think, what the hell, man? This guy doesn't know that Madueke is not even nailed, and he's picked him and he's beating me. So the outcome affects you way more than it should when you're early into the game and you're still spending reasonable amount of time either thinking about the game or watching the football. So when you start to enjoy the process of decision making, going through data, that side of things, and then letting the game do what the game does. Like in some games, the players you have will score points and the others won't. In other games, it'll be the opposite. It is just what it is. And that's basically one big aspect of understanding the game and growing up with the game and maturing with the game. Earlier, it used to affect me a lot. Like I used to be out with the kids, and Sterling, who you have captained, has missed a penalty or something like that. And I remember that completely turns your mood off. Like you're either being short with your kids, or you're on your phone a lot more, or you're distancing yourself from everyone else who's having fun. And you're like, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, this is just one player in a fantasy team. You won't even remember this in 2 years. So that understanding is a very important milestone. And I think everybody gets there. It's just some time that it takes for you to get there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get there. I think some people possibly struggle even after the first couple of seasons. But in terms of it as a content creator, has that changed anything? Is it more or less? Or?
As a content creator, look, the reality is, as a content creator, it's harder to go very rogue. I think there's very few content creators who can do that. And it's not because I'm so desperate to have a good rank, because otherwise no one will listen to me. It's actually because I don't want to look like an idiot. Like, let's say in a certain week, everybody's captaining one player, and I go, no, I know better than all of you, and I'm going to captain, let me use Madueke again, because that's a nice example. You guys captain Palmer, I'll captain Madueke. It sounds really nice, but if it doesn't work, you look like an idiot. And then you have to show up in a video the same week, actually talk about it. Why did you captain Madueke? So a lot of people just maybe even subconsciously end up doing the safer things. If it's a decision between risky, safe, they end up doing safe. There's a little bit more of going with the masses. If everybody's captaining one player, it's easier to justify doing that and everybody being wrong than you being wrong. So it's not a struggling with a aspect of content creation. I think it's a more a mental thing of what content creation makes you do. It makes you a little bit safer. That's one thing. I think the other thing I struggle with, or used to struggle with early on, is if you've said something on stream. If I have at the moment now said Madueke is a rubbish pick, and I change my mind because something else happened in my team, and now actually getting Madueke makes sense, even if it's for a short period of time.
Pras, you've really got it in for Madueke.
Well, I'm just using a consistent example. Yeah. And so you basically say, should I not do it? Because I'll look stupid because I said on the pod that he's a terrible pick. So it's like you're creating a game within the game for yourself, which is a mental thing. Most of the time, people don't care. But sometimes you get the odd comment. You told us that you don't like this player, and then you picked them. You're not being true to your listeners. And then you go, man, like, these are 50-50 calls we're making. We say something on the podcast, you try to give a balanced view, but you can still change your mind because you could learn other things. Some things could have changed in your own team in terms of the path that you want to take. Or you just think you were wrong in some of the views, and now that you've heard other people and you've done a little bit of more data digging, that you think, Madueke is a fine pick. So it's
Pras,
that side of thing.
Just to take the logical next step from that, then, has being a content creator, has it changed the way you play at all?
Not me personally, because I've always been a little bit thorough, analytical. I know my moves for the next 3 weeks. And so if I'm talking about it in content, I will be, if I change that path, I will be telling you why I do it, because there's an injury or I feel something else has changed. I'm never as knee jerky anyway. So it's very rare that I will come on a podcast on Tuesday and say, I'm captaining this player and I change. But that's not because I'm some amazing content creator. That's just the way I play. Other people play differently to me, where they go a little bit by, I'm going to go by the gut. Whatever I feel on Friday, that's what I'm going to do. And that's fairly good. Like, that's also successful because information changes by Friday. So in my case, I haven't changed too much. If anything, my ranks have improved. Like, they have become even more consistent because every week I'm actually having to talk about my decisions rather than just doing it because I feel like it on a Thursday night. So I feel it's improved, but I can also see other cases where people have had bad seasons when they start doing content.
I don't know if you want to talk about this here, Pras. I put it in here. You said one of the things you might want to talk about, I guess we may have kind of covered it, Lois, is a FPL player, FPL International Players. But I'm wondering, does that apply to you? Because if you've lived in London the whole time you've been playing FPL, but do you move?
So I haven't played FPL outside of London, unless I'm traveling, and I travel a bit for work, and my family is in India, and I travel to the US quite a bit as well. So I do know of them, but because I've watched football in these places, I sympathize. Like, one of the things that I feel is underappreciated is people who religiously follow FPL despite being in terrible timelines. Like, we take it for granted that the Liverpool-Everton match was postponed at 9 o'clock, was it, or 10 o'clock UK time?
I was in bed myself despite being in the UK, but
so those are other reasons. Those are lifestyle reasons. But people would be, based in the US, like the Midwest, would not even be up. And okay, some people are super engaged and they want to wake up at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. Not everybody wants to do that. Like, or maybe you can't do that. You put an alarm, but you couldn't wake up. So that's very underappreciated. Think of the people. Like, one of the joys that I get playing FPL is actually then watching the game with my FPL players playing the game. Like, I would not get as much joy. I support Man United. If Chelsea is playing Everton, right? I would not get any joy watching that game. Like, it would be fine. It would be playing on TV. I'd be doing my stuff. Now change that to you own and Captain Palmer, you own Nicholas Jackson, and you own Colwill. Now you're a Chelsea fan for 90 minutes, even though it's weird to say as a Man United fan, but you're actually rooting for Palmer to score a hat-trick. And so it changes the way you enjoy the game. You enjoy the sport. And so I feel now, take the example of people in Australia or people in Southeast Asia. Most of the games are in the middle of the night when they're sleeping. So their enjoyment of the game is completely different in terms of how they engage with the game. So I think sometimes we need to be sensitive that if you're in Europe, or if you're in a sensible time zone around UK, you already have a massive advantage, and people should sort of appreciate that, because other people are having to make a lot of sacrifices to have the same level of information and enjoyment out of the game.
Yeah, I actually made a whole video on deadline streams based on, I saw a comment. It's one of the first videos on the channel I made from someone in America saying that they'd been getting up all season at 2 a.m, and then, I mean, because you've first of all, you've got the getting up, but then also after the like the excitement of a deadline stream, it's going to be difficult to get back to sleep then as well.
This is the issue. Like, you got a late league, Rico Lewis is not starting, you quickly make a transfer, get somebody else in, and now your adrenaline is rushing. You're not going back to bed that easily.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think there's anything FPL could do? I mean, I'm going to ask you in a bit if you think there's anything FPL in general could do about their mental health, but do you think there's anything they could do about the deadline? I mean, I have talked about it in interviews before. It seems every time someone comes up with a solution and there's another negative to it. But what your perspective?
I don't think there is an easy solution. Like, a lot of people are championing like the kickoff of the first game being the deadline. Yeah. Well, that's even worse, because then you have to wake up, because you will have 11 players, and now it's not just a league. You have access to 22 players that are actually starting the game, and people will start building the strategy towards, oh, it's an early kickoff, I will get the lineups, and you are in bed. So that's not great. If you make it too far back, like if you make it 6 hours, 7 hours before, A, not all leagues are stopped by then, and B, like, I like the fact that you wake up on a Saturday morning with a little bit of butterflies in your stomach on your transfers. You still have to make those couple of transfers. You're waiting for some news, and that's enjoyment. Now, I hate leaks. I think if leaks went away, it would make the game a lot more fun. But we've seen leaks even 12 hours before the game, so I don't think you can cut it out completely.
No, I agree. It's like you said. Every time you think of a solution, I mean, there's other ones like move the whole deadline, 24 hours before the kickoff, but then people are going to be, you're still going to be some sort of leaks coming out, and it's just going to,
and it's going to make the game boring. Like when imagine the time when the deadline finishes to the first game or the lineups come out. That's a boring period, because that's the little period when you're actually not thinking about FPL at all. Like, I like to think about FPL. I don't want that I have to submit my team by Friday morning, and then from Friday morning till Saturday morning, I have nothing to think about on FPL, because I've made my team is locked in. I can't do anything. The games haven't started. It's just it would ruin the fun a little bit for me.
Yeah, sure. So is there any two more questions I usually ask in this section, Pras? What advice would you give to someone who maybe is struggling with their mental health or their mood this season as a result of their FPL team maybe not doing so well?
So I think one thing I always do is, if I'm not doing well, I tend to just disengage with the game. Like, if it's a Sunday night and my captain's is blanked and the other captain's just scored a hat trick, I will switch off the app. I mean, close down the app, close the desktop browser, not listen to any content. And I'm actively telling you, as a content creator, don't listen to The Wire that week. Don't listen to anything else. Just disengage. Because what happens is, just like any game that we have played, have you noticed any game? It can be car racing, it can be a whatever. When you lose 3 or 4, you tend to lose more. Basically, they call it the tilt, right? Basically, when you're not in the right headspace, you make worse decisions. It gets worse. It happens in gambling as well. And so what the advice that I always give, and I used to do, is, until the next Friday, I do not engage with the game. Let the prices change, do whatever, because by Friday, you have a much more clear head. You think, yeah, it is what it is. It was just a couple of goals. It's not the end of the world. 15 points, is that so big? I can make that up. Then you have a clear head and you make better decisions. If that's happening every other week, keep doing the same thing. And if nothing is changing, you don't have to play, man. Like, who cares about one year's rank? Like, it's not that important. So it's very easy to say now, when you're not going through it, and when somebody is going through it, you can't just say, look, man, snap out of it, just disengage. All I'm trying to give is a little bit of some tools that people could use. Try to separate the fact that if you made a good decision, there's this tool called FPL Optimized, where you can see if you've been lucky or unlucky. If I've had a bad week, I like going on it to see that actually I've been unlucky. Like, even this software is telling me that I have made a good decision, but I've been unlucky by about 20 points. Fair enough, move on, man.
That's based on like the variance compared to what you'd expect, isn't it? Something like
Correct. Yeah. Correct. So it's just stuff like this which helps me, but most importantly, it's the disengagement. Just forget about the game. Think about other things in your life, because you anyway don't want to be listening to content. People say, hey, I got 64 points when you're sitting on 27. You don't want to be listening to stuff anyway. Like, it's stuff. At that point, and I'm giving you my personal example, it irritates me. Like, listening to people brag about, oh, I got a brace from this guy. I transferred in this guy and he scored a goal. You don't want anything to do with that, because you've had a terrible week. Don't listen to anything.
Sure. I always love it when the content creator says, don't listen to content.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best way to get back on track.
So last question I asked, just before we go on to have a little general chat about how it's going this season, Pras. Do you think there's any changes? So I try not to limit this one to FPL, because there are other forms of fantasy football as well, Telegraph, Fan Team. There's lots of different versions. Do you think there are any changes? I mean, you can keep it to FPL if you want. Could make, or other fantasy football sites, to generally help their mental health of their player base? It's a bit of a conceptual question.
Look, I think price changes don't help.
I agree.
Like, the constant pressure of I need to make a decision, otherwise I'm going to be priced out, or everybody else is moving on this player, they'll have 0.1 more team value than me. I'd like to see if, as one of the changes, FPL basically say while the game week is going on from Saturday morning to Sunday night, or if there's a Monday night game, then a Monday, there will be no price changes, because we want people to make informed decisions, not stupid decisions, making transfers on a Saturday night before their Sunday players have even played, because they're on a tilt from their captain blank on a Saturday.
Sorry, Pras,
it just doesn't happen.
Guys, do you do that? Are you one of the people that will look at FPL statistics like at 10 o'clock at night? Or?
Depends. So I do tend to look at FPL. Well, now it's live FPL. They have a great predictor, and so I do tend to look at them, but I rarely react to price changes unless I have the luxury of many free transfers or I'm getting priced out. Otherwise, I'm an advocate of just wait for more information. Information generally sometimes changes the path anyway. Today you want to buy a certain player, but another player gets injured. Let's say Robertson, then Simicast becomes an amazing pick instead. So why did you pick another guy? So it's not about just any player getting injured in your team. It's about anything could change over the week, which would change information. So in a way, it helps me that people go early, they regret their moves, or they make their moves absent information. And so I can then react later. Not that I don't make early moves. I have made some, but I tend to do them very cautiously. Like I know when I know there's a buffer, I have some extra transfers and things like that. But coming back to your question on mental health, I just think the pricing doesn't help from that element. Like that pressure of not having a bad week and then also trying to react and try to make decisions about your own team, it makes things worse. So I think that would be one change I would recommend.
I said this one on Juice when I was on there last night. My solution to this would be, because I do think you do need some element of, if Palmer's 5 million, he has to go up a bit, but would be to have it so that if Palmer goes up 0.03 from Monday to Friday, that change to his price doesn't take effect until after the deadline, if you see what I mean. So there's still a change. The players' prices are still changing, but you haven't got to worry about it happening during the week. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be doable. It's just that you will see more big jumps in like prices or team values at the deadline. But yeah, why not? Like one of the other concerns that I have with team value, and this year we'll talk about my, how the season's going and stuff. Like I've gotten luckier this year than other years. So I've actually gotten to see how it is on the other side of the table, which is basically the team value just keeps shooting up and up and up because you keep getting lucky with making picks and other people then watch your players and they just shoot up in value. So I think the advantage, if you're getting lucky, is only magnified by team value, by price changes. Because you are not only transfers ahead of people, you're also getting team value ahead of people. It gets very hard for people to catch you. So I think the whole concept of price changes is good. It's good because it makes it hard for people to copy teams. If there were no price changes, a lot more people would copy teams, which is not good for the game.
No.
But it just something needs to change in it, which helps people's decision making, because the bad decision making is what leads to tilt, is what leads to mental health issues.
Okay. So yeah, we'll just have a little bit of a chat now. I call these the FPL Now questions. Just the general chat about how things go. Just for transparency for people watching this, we're recording it about a week before Christmas, so this is coming out. Will probably come out in early January, but yeah. So I just generally start by asking. I've got a few things here I want to ask you, Pras. But yeah, first of all, how is your season going? You having quite a good one, aren't you, for it?
It's been pretty good. I'm like 24k, and we're talking obviously at the end of game week 16. So hopefully when you guys are listening to this in January, I'm still in the top 25k. If I'm not, I'm just gonna have Gary not release this podcast. But I've actually not been this high for a very long time. So it feels like it's been a lucky season. It's been lucky in many aspects. Like I started with Salah and Haaland together, which not many people.
The highest you've been at this stage of the season?
I don't really remember ranks as such, but it feels like so. Okay. Because I'm generally, I know my podcast partner is called Late Riser, but I generally basically make my moves later in terms of the climbing ranks because the chips are played. I think I tend to play the chips more sensibly than the average. So therefore, I tend to climb more at the back end of the season. to be this high or this early, you have to get lucky. I would say anyone under the rank 200k, if they're saying anything other than the fact that they've gotten lucky to be here, they're lying to themselves.
Yeah.
So because there's a lot of 50-50s that I've gone my way. Like I mentioned, like I started the season with Salah and Haaland, which turned out to be very lucky, right? Some people had one or the other, but both absolutely smashed it early season. I was very lucky to switch from Haaland to Salah in game week 10, which basically a lot of people took a little bit of time to get to. So those are the core two things. But then in the middle also, like there have been a lot of things that have led to, me having a good season. My team value is like 105 million. So it's, it's a combination. Yeah. It's again, the fact that I've been lucky on certain picks and made huge team value gains. Like even players like Smith Rowe gave me like 0.4. So these are not picks that generally have delivered for other people, but when I was on them, they were doing very well. So I know, because I focus on decision making and not the outcome, and the outcome is lucky. I know. So
it's still a great start.
May that continue.
Yeah, I've had the last 2 seasons have been my best starts. I've been like in the top 100,000, and this season I'm struggling a bit more. It's I've got up to 500,000, but it's definitely
oh, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Like I think at least being under 1 million around Christmas means you can still have a good season.
Yeah, hopefully. So maybe I should have put this in the content creation bit, but I am going to blow smoke up a bit up your ass now, Pras. So you talk a lot about, when I've watched your content, about the macro versus micro level. So macro level, I suppose we're talking about over 6 sort of game weeks, so it's micro level. So first of all, what do you think is the most important to focus on? And secondly, this is where I'm going to blow smoke up your ass a bit. How do you think you got so good at explaining this stuff? Because you can explain stuff that, I think of myself as a fairly intelligent bloke, but that really just makes things so intuitively easy to understand.
The second one, I can only say that I do this for a living. Like I'm not a professor or anything, but I make a lot of presentations. Like a lot of my job is
right.
So what I do is basically called M&A, mergers and acquisitions. So we have a company that wants us to buy them, buy a stake in them. And so I have to go to my investment committee and say, these are the reasons why I like this company and why we should invest in them. Reason number one, the sector is great. It's seeing some great growth. It's linked to the GDP, and the GDP is going really well. The inflation numbers are coming down. So we think it's a great sector.
I imagine that's going to have a micro and macro.
That's exactly it.
Well. Yeah.
That's exactly it. So when I'm talking about the GDP, when I'm talking about the growth, I'm talking about the revenue drivers, I'm talking about the macro things. The micro things, I'm going to say, look, these guys have the cutting edge technology, and I'm sounding like the Wolf of Wall Street now, but they basically have a cutting edge technology which will give them competitive advantage, to give them higher margins than their peers. And so these are the micro things that matter. Their management, this guy that is the head of technology, used to be working at Amazon, and he led their product development, and he's the guy who's going to deliver the returns. That's the micro. So I do this for a living, where I'm supposed to take heaps of data about a company, valuation of that company, and present it to my management team or the investment committee in 30 minutes. So I feel like those are slightly more complex things that I have to do. And so maybe, again, I'm not also blowing smoke up my own ass, but I'm saying it's just something I do a lot. I have to do it.
It makes sense. That would explain why you're so good at explaining it.
So that's basically how I got into it. I forgot what was the first part of your question. Sorry, Gary.
It's a bit of a crap question, but which do you think is the most important to focus on?
Oh, in terms of, yeah. I think the macro. I think the long-term view. Because when we tend to think about FPL decisions, we get very tempted by the micro. Somebody is going to put out a thread on Twitter. This player has got 3 assists and 4 goals in the last 6 matches. He's now playing Southampton at home. Is he going to be in your FPL team? And you're like, oh shit, man, this guy's going to score 20 points and he's not in my team. And so there's a lot of FOMO in the community because they think of the micro. They think about the next week. Your team doesn't need to be perfect every week. Your team needs to directionally go in a place where in 6 weeks from now, you should have a robust, good-looking team. Not the best team every week, But in 6 weeks, it should be a team that you should be happy with, that it's going in the right direction. So when it's the time for picking a player that has really sexy two fixtures, but then you don't really believe in his minutes and you don't really believe in his long-term minutes, versus another player that is boring. So let's take an example. Let's compare Robinson to a Konza, right? So Robinson's so good, he's getting forward, but it's Fulham. Actually, Konza is not a good example. Let me take somebody like Joe Gomez or someone, right? Who playing for Liverpool, more boring. And let's say Joe Gomez was nailed. I've not thought through this example, but a more sensible example. Let's take Timber, okay? And so is Robinson better or is Timber better? I would always pick Timber because I think long term, in 6 weeks, Arsenal defense is still going to be good, but Robinson may or may not be good. And so that's the type of thinking where I think having a long term view is slightly more important than a short-term view. Not that you shouldn't have. Some people are very good. Like Latras is very good at short-term views. He can really pick out the player that you think will haul. So it's people's strengths, and I think mine is long-term.
I don't actually have this down as a question. What do you think of? Like I'm a big user of the aid, not copy of FPL Review. What do you think of using? Obviously, not just FPL Review. There's other versions out there of using those sort of tools to help with things like that.
I see FPL Review as a friend, an unbiased friend. Like, we have our WhatsApp groups where people say, guys, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Kirkes and Isak, or do you prefer Trent and Raul Jimenez? You've seen these, right? People do this all the time. What are they doing? They're basically crowdsourcing answers, like opinions. But what your WhatsApp group does is, your WhatsApp group, if Kirkes has just scored a goal, you can bet all your house that everybody will say Kirkes plus Isak is the best option, because they have a hindsight bias. They have an outcome bias. And so that's a flawed way of checking which option is better. How about you go actually and look at market odds and you say, who has the better goal scoring odds? Is it Isak or Raul Jimenez? Who has the better clean sheet odds? Is it Kirkes or is it Trent? And then using that to get to expected data and basically saying, oh, actually expected data is so similar, I can go with either. Doesn't matter. Or it could be that I'm actually being an idiot here. Like Kirkes is rubbish. Like Trent plus Raul Jimenez is way better. And so having an unbiased friend who can give you that opinion, you can disagree with the friend. You can say, look, even though you're telling me this, I'll go against you. I like it. So therefore, I tend to use the unbiased friend in a lot of things. I tend to disagree with that unbiased friend a lot. So in people who know me, who see my team selections, I'm not one of those who had, Bruno Fernandes since game week 1. I'm not one of those that will pick players that I don't generally believe in. I make a lot of mistakes and I'm happy to own up to my mistakes because I want to play the game my own way. But if somebody has given me a complex mathematical puzzle to solve and there is a calculator available, I am going to use the calculator. Yeah. This is not about me proving to people that I'm a guru in maths and I can do it myself, which is the equivalent of people saying, I know my football. I don't need anybody to tell me which one is better. You don't need to do that. This is a game that needs a little bit of mathematical planning. I think the community is also, you must have seen the Rob T numbers, right? The Rob T numbers that come up every
the guy
who
says percentage
goal scoring odds,
clean
sheet odds.
Yeah.
This is a way of the community getting more analytical. Because when you see clean sheet odds for Trent, let's say clean sheet odds for Trent are 50%. What that means is that there's a 50% chance of Trent getting a clean sheet. A clean sheet is 4 points. So that's 50% times 4, that's 2 points. That Trent is his expected points. He should get 2 appearance points. So his expected points for this week are 4. Of course, there's some bonus built into it. Like if he gets a clean sheet, he could get some bonus. So let's say 4.7. That's how models work. What FPL Review is doing is they don't take market odds. They take their own underlying data and they give a similar expected value. That's what these models are doing. And so as a community, we're able to understand very easily, Palmer's goal scoring odds or expected goals are 0.8 compared to Salah, which is 0.6. So I like Palmer. But then they refuse to look at somebody who's actually taken these goal scoring odds, converted into expected points. That's what FPL Review is, nothing more than that.
Yeah, I really like it. And to be honest, I think their way of predicting what's going to happen is a lot better than market odds, because I always think market odds are a little bit biased by the bookies. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I just.
So the odds that are shared by Rob are basically cleaned out for bookies' profits.
Okay.
So sometimes, like, take for example, whenever England are in the Euros, like, England will be favorites, even though you know that they're not going to win.
Yeah.
That's because the bookies want you to, because there'll be a lot of betting on England, and if England end up winning, they don't want to go bankrupt, and so there is a little bit of profit margin built in. So that's basically where Rob T's numbers are clean. So he has taken out the bias.
Right, okay. So this is probably it's going to have been talked to death by the time this video comes out. But last week the assistant manager clip came out. I made a video when I was very ill, to be honest, giving my opinions on it, and I went into a bit of a conspiracy rant in that, which I won't go over. But I know you gave your opinions the next day, and I think we kind of had similar opinions that we're not perhaps great fans of it. I just wondered if your opinions, just if you could share your general opinions, maybe if they've changed over the last week or.
No, as you know, my opinions don't change unless information has changed, and information hasn't changed. So, look, I think it's a very, very high potential chip, which when it's introduced in the middle of the season doesn't feel great, right? I mean, as a chip introduced of such high potential should have been known at the beginning of the season.
I think it's gonna blow out the potential of all the other chips apart from the wild card, I guess, isn't it?
Even more than the wild card.
Like
because it's over 3 weeks, right? So you could get lucky over 3 weeks and make like 70 points. I think the expected like base case will be like people making 30 to 40 points. That's still more than any other chip that you have. So it is a huge chip with huge potential. It's interesting, but they've overcomplicated it, is my view. Like, there was no need to have the manager included as a slot within the team, like a third player slot. There was no need to put a value on the manager. You could just have it like a chip, right? Like when you have to play triple captain, you don't have to set aside 1 million to play the triple captainship. It's just, you just play it. So you could have done it that way. And so that's why I'm not a fan, but I don't mind it. Like, anything that includes a strategic element to planning and you know, adding to how I can gain an edge towards the masses is never a bad thing.
Yeah, the rant I went on was basically that it perhaps brings FPL a little bit more similar to actual betting, which I've kind of calmed down on a bit, but I'd still say I don't really like the idea that we're essentially going for a team instead of a player. It seems to almost fundamentally change something within the game. Do you get what I mean?
I absolutely do. Like, we are trying to predict the events in the game, who will score the goal. We're not trying to predict the game. The actual score, the actual, you know, who will win is not what fantasy has always been about. Fantasy is about picking players. So I do get what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay, great. So last question I usually ask Pras, and I've got noted here, top 25k player. Pras is a top 25k finisher 7 times. So with such an amazing FPL manager here, what would be your general tips? I'm just talking, you know, really in general, not this season necessarily, in terms of how someone could be become a better FPL player.
It's a very loaded question. We could do a whole podcast about it. But what can I say? I think know your objective. What is your objective of playing the game? If your objective is to have fun while watching football, then keep doing, you know, the Maverick picks. Keep doing, you know, I have a gut feel for Iwobi, or I'm going to pick these players and try to play differently, because your objective is to enjoy playing and, more importantly, to enjoy watching the football. If your sole objective is to do well in FPL, then I think you have to learn to play boring. You have to learn to make sensible moves. You have to learn to be patient. You have to learn to not pick the sexy pick every week.
Would you describe yourself as a boring manager, Pras?
Yeah, I mean, if those are I would describe myself as a disciplined manager, as somebody who prioritizing.
Planning. That's a nice way of saying boring.
Exactly, it is. But you know, boring could also be like you pick the template. Like, I went against the template. Like, again, this season I can actually say the whole world went either Haaland or only Salah. I went both. So there were instances where I wanted to go against, and I'm happy to do that. So if that is not boring, that's okay. What is boring is my captaincy picks I don't think I've gone different to the popular pick anytime, any one of the 15, 16 weeks we've had so far. I don't need to. Because I think if I feel that the whole community is on a captain that I think will score the most points, I don't need to take on everybody. I don't need to take on the world. I don't think my conviction is more than if the community is agreeing with the Rob T numbers, is agreeing with the review top captain, I'll just pick that. So I think these are the things which make it, if you want to have a good season, be sensible, be boring, don't need to chase like, the upside in 1 week, have a more long-term view. That's the way I play, and that's the only advice I can give.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I was sort of guessing with you a bit, but I think I play almost in exactly the same way, to be honest. Okay, awesome. Pras, thank you so much for coming on, mate. Is there anything you'd like to say before we finish?
Not really. I mean, I've had a great time. Thank you for having me on. I think it's a great idea for a show. And certainly on the back of this, I'm going to go check out the few that I haven't yet listened to, because this is evergreen stuff. And I wish you all the best for growing the channel. I know you do some non-interview stuff as well, so your own FPL content. So best of luck with that. And yeah, look forward to keeping in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pras. Thank you very much so much for listening. Please like and subscribe to help me get more great guests like Pras on, and to hopefully help us get up to 300, calm down, Gary, subscribers. And I will see you in the next one.